This is part 12 of jQuery tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss how to select values of checked checkboxes that are present in different groups. And along the way, we'll also discuss how to pass a variable to a jQuery selector. We will be working with the same example that we worked with in part 11. So please watch part 11 before proceeding with this video. Now, on this page, we have just one checkbox group, that is the skills checkbox group. And look at the selector we are using. Input type equals checkbox colon checked. So what is the selector going to do? It's going to return us all checkboxes that are checked. Since we have only one checkbox group on this page, this selector is going to work fine without issues. But what if we have two checkbox groups like this? Notice we have skills checkbox group and preferred cities checkbox group. And what is this selector going to do? This is going to give us all the checkboxes that are checked from both the groups, irrespective of whichever button you click. But that's not what we want. When we click Get Selected Skills, we only want the checkboxes that are checked within the skills group. Similarly, when we click Get Selected Cities button, we only want the checkboxes that are checked and are in cities group. So let's see how to achieve this. We will be modifying the example that we worked with in part 11. So please watch part 11 before proceeding. Let's flip to Visual Studio. So this is the same example that we worked with in the previous video session. And at the moment, we only have the skills checkbox group. And to speed things up, I have already typed the required HTML to get, the preferred cities checkbox group and two button elements. So look at the image here. We want preferred cities checkbox group and two buttons, get selected skills and get selected cities. And here is the HTML for that. So let's copy that, and instead of this button, the submit button here, I'm going to paste the HTML that we have copied. And if you look at this HTML, this is straightforward. We have three checkboxes, and look at the name for these three checkboxes. It's cities, and for these skills checkboxes, it is skills. And then we have two break elements and then two button elements. Okay, right. So let's save these changes and let's reload. So we should get a UI that is similar to what we see on the slide here. Okay, now let's wire up click event handlers to these two buttons. Now let's scroll all the way up. So here is our jQuery code, and look at this. This jQuery code is from our previous example. At the moment, we have this btn submit button to which the click event handler is wired up. Instead, we want to wire up a click event handler to these two buttons. Okay. Before that, let's actually encapsulate all this code, which we have written in the previous video session, into its own function. So I'm going to create a variable here. So let's name this get checked checkboxes, and we want this to be a function. So I'm going to put all this code inside that function. Okay, so this is a function. So I'm going to cut this function. Okay, so we have the click event handler for that button. So outside of that click event handler, so this is the closing of the click event handler for this button, and this is the closing of the ready function. So the function that we have just created, I'm going to paste that here. So this is now present within the ready function. Okay, so now let's make a copy of this. Okay, and we have two different buttons. One is btn get selected skills and the other one is btn get selected cities. Those are the IDs. So let's wire up click event handlers to both of those buttons. So get the button by ID, and then we are wiring up a click event handler. Let's do the same thing for the other button, btn get selected cities. Alright, so when we click the button, what we want to do, we want to call this function. The reason why we encapsulated this jQuery code into a separate function is because we're going to reuse this function in both of these click event handlers. So that's the reason we encapsulated it. So let's call this function within the click event handler of both the button controls. Alright, so let's save those changes. And if you look at this function, look at the selector, input type equals checkbox colon checked. So what is this going to do? This is going to select all the checkboxes that are checked, you know, from both the groups. Okay, so let's quickly look at that in action. Let's reload this page, and from the skills group, let's select JavaScript and jQuery, and from cities New Delhi and London. Look at that. When I click get selected skills, it says 4 checkboxes checked, and it gets all the checkboxes from both the groups, whatever is checked. Okay, now look at this. When I click get selected cities, I get the same thing again. Okay, and that's not what we want. When we click get selected skills, we only want the checkboxes from the skills group that are checked, and the same for get selected cities. Get me the checked checkboxes from the preferred cities group. So let's see how to do that. So why do we have that problem at the moment? At the moment we have that problem because we are using type attribute here. So if you look at these checkboxes, all of them are of type checkbox. Now instead of using type attribute, why can't we use the name attribute? Because name attribute is different for the checkboxes that are present in skills group, and it's cities for the checkboxes that are present in cities group. So what I'm going to do here is use the name attribute. So input name equals skills. Okay, but we can't hard code it like this. What's the problem if we hard code it like this? The problem is, irrespective of whichever button you click, it's always going to give you the checkboxes that are checked and present in skills group, and that's not what we want. So we want this to be a variable. So we want to pass a variable to this selector. Okay, so to this function I'm going to pass a variable. Let's name it group name. And then instead of hard coding the group name like this, what I'm going to do is pass that variable in. So this is the selector beginning. So I'm going to terminate that with another single quote. And then instead of this hard coded skills name, we are going to use that group name. And then concatenate that with the rest of the selector string. Okay, so now this function has got a parameter. So we need to pass a value for that parameter when we call that function. So when we click get selected cities button, the group name is going to be cities, and when we click this get selected skills, the group name is going to be skills. Alright, so let's save those changes, reload the page, and let's select jQuery and VB, New York and London. So get selected skills. Look at that, we only get the checkboxes that are checked and present in skills group. And when we click get selected cities, 2 checkboxes checked, New York and London, only the checkboxes from the preferred cities group. Okay, now we only have one div element to display the result. That's why it's overwriting. But if you have 2 div elements, you can display them separately. In fact, let's do that. So at the moment, here we have one div element. Let's include another div element, and let's actually put a break in between those two. And let's name this first div skills, and the second one div cities. And look at the names, both of them are prefixed with div, and this rest of the name skills that matches with the group name, and the same is this one, cities matches with the second group. And I have done that intentionally because we can make use of that group name here. So here at the moment the div ID is div result, but we don't have that div anymore. Instead, what I'm going to do is use the variable name that is coming into this function, that's the group name, and then we are going to concatenate that with this word div. So if the group is skills, the div is going to be div skills. If the group name is cities, then the div is going to be div cities, and then we are setting the HTML on that. So the same for this one. Alright, so let's save those changes, and let's reload this page. JavaScript, C#, New York, New Delhi, and get selected skills, so 2 checkboxes checked, and get selected cities, 2 checkboxes checked, and we get the selected cities. Alright, so at the moment we are relying on these buttons, to actually get the selected checkboxes. Now instead, why don't we do that as soon as the click event happens on the checkbox? For example, when I click on jQuery checkbox, it should automatically say 3 checkboxes checked, and then it should list all the 3 checkboxes. So let's see how to achieve that. Now to achieve that, all you have to do is wire up the click event handler to all the checkboxes, just like how we did it for the button controls, right? So here we are getting the button by ID and then associating a click event handler to that. Instead, why don't we get all the checkboxes from the skills group and then associate a click event handler to them? Okay, and how to get the checkboxes, all the checkboxes from skills group? Use input name equals skills selector. So instead of the ID selector here, I'm actually going to use input where name equals skills. So this is going to give us all the checkboxes from the skills group, and to those checkboxes we are wiring up a click event handler. And let's do the same thing for the checkboxes that are present in cities group. So here the group name is going to be cities. Alright, so let's save these changes, and we don't need these buttons anymore, so let's get rid of these buttons. Let's save the HTML, reload the page, so we don't have the buttons anymore. So now when I select the checkboxes, look at that. And similarly when we select the cities, and when we uncheck, everything happens on a click on the checkbox. And here is the HTML for the first example, the jQuery code, HTML for the second example, and the jQuery code for the second example. Thank you for listening and have a great day.